I feel you on that.
You know,
Hey, Aditya.
that's what I was like. I could tell you this, and you'd be like, "Yep, I know the story."
Exactly. Oh, kids. Both of my children are snotty nosed right now, so I've somehow managed not to get sick. So we'll see how that goes. Just wait until your kid goes to preschool.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear then every week is a tailgate or a roundabout way of different diseases.
That first year is rough, I will tell you. Last year was rough for us, but everyone has to go through it, I guess.
It's
Well,
to build immunity, resilience.
totally. Well, thank you for joining me today in the Tofu Bowl. Excited to chat all things go to market with you. I saw your post actually this morning, which is where I kind of wanted to start because this is also a long held belief of mine that SDRs should sit under marketing. So tell me kind of your thoughts on this. I'll tell you what I think and we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, I mean, first off, thanks for having me. And I think we've talked on a few LinkedIn posts and we met a while back through other people. And I'm glad to be having mutual views on stuff. But the SDR thing, what it came about was it's just like seeing SDR organizations and how they have evolved from 2014 or actually 12. I was an SDR to now. And the biggest shift is like, it's not about providing value anymore, right? It's really like, how many emails can I send and how many are personalized and how many get opened, not and how much pipeline did I generate, not meeting set, meetings had. And for me, an SDR is like, yes, they're supposed to get meetings, but they're not accountable for pipeline. And for me, it's about, can you deliver value as SDR? Because I view SDRs as a farming system to become on account execs. And if your account execs don't understand the market, don't understand the problem your prospects are having, and they can't talk intelligently about how the problem could be solved with your product or without your product, then you don't have trust. And that comes from SDR spending time, like understanding the company. What are their problems? And if they're measured against, hey, we're not worried about you generating pipe, get a meeting with them and then make sure you constantly provide value every time you engage with them. I think that leads to a company and a brand that is more focused on the long term and not the short term of let's get a meeting, let's see if we can get pipeline immediately for this quarter. Because oftentimes, as we know, 95% of the people are not ready to make a buying decision in the current quarter that you're trying to prospect them in.
What's interesting is I think right now, I feel like SDRs used to only sit with sales, and then it slowly started shifting to now it's kind of 50-50 from what we see in terms of our customers and companies we talk to. But the way I've always thought about it is SDRs to generate demand. They're not closing deals, they're not doing the relationship building, the late stage pipe. So I totally agree with you that they should be experts on the market and the product and be a guide or kind of a shepherd to help figure out is it a good fit. But at the end of the day, they're measured on generating demand, which
Yep.
means they should sit under demand gen, which is always a part of marketing. And it just feels like those two have to be in lockstep. I always joke that anytime you're looking at the customer journey, it's like a relay race. I used to run track, and in relays you had a baton and there's at some point two people running in the same direction with two hands on the baton, and there's a lot of handoffs, but if the handoffs are literally like a chuck it over the fence, it's going to be a much worse experience for the buyer as opposed to this really seamless experience where they don't feel like they're getting handed off from person to person and team to team.
That's a great analogy. That is exactly like you put it better than I could, is that handoff needs to happen. And the handoff has to happen where both are on, where both people are cool. Transfer information has happened, not just I threw it over, it's on you, hot potato, you deal with it now. Right. And that's where I think the relationship fails, because SDRs requires marketing to work with sales leaders to make sure that a handoff happens. And a lot of marketing leaders don't get taught how to work with sales leaders in that sense. They're taught how to work with sales leaders from a, what's my pipeline? What's my opportunity goal? How do I do this? But not, hey, here's something coming your way. It's a great meeting. We warmed them up. They're not ready for pipe yet, but there's something that if you nurture, we're going to get there over time. Because the biggest deals, as we all know, don't happen because someone's ready to buy. It takes time and it takes months. It takes investment that you're showing them that you understand them and their problems, not that your product can crush it for them. That's never how it starts. And that I feel like I could talk all day about the outbound stuff and talk about how it's all messed up. But I think it starts from that. And that relay race is really critical. As you put it, like both hands have to be on the baton to hand it over, because it's something precious. You're literally worked on this and gave them value. And like, you nurtured to be like, here you go, sales. Like, it's good. Now, like, think about it, how we can get to the next step, not just say let's close it. They're ready. That's usually never where these things are.
One thing too that I feel like gets overlooked a bit is everyone's always talking about the SDRs need to be learning from the marketing team and need to be ingesting this information. But the flip side is also true, because SDRs are oftentimes the first line of defense when it comes to actually talking to a human, which means that they're getting really, really useful data that needs to get passed over to the marketing team too. And I feel like that feedback loop often is a little bit more broken. I think it's a bit easier if they are sitting under marketing, because at least they're kind of absorbing the same thing. But demand gen should be going to SDRs constantly to get feedback for what are people saying, what language are they using, who are you talking to, and how are different conversations going. And I feel like that actual anecdotal data, as opposed to like visual data of which ones converted to meetings, is missed a lot of times.
So you actually hit a nail on the head. I've actually in many orgs had to do this, and it's usually like I spend Fridays. I'm like, cool, let's spend time with the SDR team. I need 30 minutes. Can you guys tell me what meetings were great, what meetings sucked, what meetings you think are going to the next stage? And then out of the campaigns we've launched, what ones did you see work well? The messaging that we provided for you. And like we sit and actually go through and have every SDR tell us like, hey, can you spend 5 minutes beforehand what you've done here? And so that way from every SDR, we get qualitative information, because the quantitative SDR Salesforce dashboards will give you, right? But this will tell us like, hey, this campaign didn't resonate. Like an example is we were giving Nintendo Switches away for a demo, and we found that wasn't really resonating. And we're like, why? Like, well, everyone has a Switch and they're all waiting for the new Switch. We're like, oh, that's interesting. We didn't think of that. And then another one that's resonating is we're giving away custom Jordans, and we're seeing that resonate really well. And it's because, especially holidays, it's not for them. They want to give it to their kids, the people we want meetings with. And these are like execs and VPs who are like, I'll give you $100 gift card. They're like, dude, my time's worth more than $100. But then we found from SDR feedback, something that's personalized and customized, they can't get themselves, that they can't equate a monetary value to, they're more receptive towards.
Actually, on that point, this is something I've always been really hesitant to do, of offer people any kind of anything with monetary value to take a meeting. And I know everyone does this, and please convince me why this is good, or like, I just feel so icky about it. And there's something about like, if you're coming to this meeting solely because I'm going to give you like custom Jordans, are you really going to take away anything from this? Like, convince me that this works.
All right. So, okay, we'll step back here. I'm not going to convince you it works or it doesn't. What I'm going to say is it really depends on the stage of the brand you're at. And I believe very fundamentally in using other brands to build your brand. And I mean this in the sense of like, I'm using Jordans, not as a way to get you to the meeting, but as a way for you to remember who I am. Sure, you may not give a shit about the meeting. You may not want to buy anything from me, but you will remember that I give you custom Jordans, and you will tell people that I gave you custom Jordans. And I think of it more of like as using brands earlier in your stage to get that lift. It's not so much that the Jordans are going to get me the deal. It's that now you're going to tell other people, hey, this company I took a meeting with, where'd you get those custom Jordans with your initials? Oh, this company I took a meeting with had it. And that is what I'm really trying to do. And an example where I've luckily had some success multiple times with this is using Yetis and giving Yetis away at conferences. And people like branded Yetis, they go gaga for. And it's using that Yeti brand to get them to come to me to have a conversation. Sure, I'm giving them something, but it gets them to have a conversation to let me start building my brand. And that's what I care about. I don't care what the giveaway is. It could be an influencer. It could be a subject matter expert, a thought leader in the space. But my entire thing is, how can I use someone else's brand to build myself up to get your attention and remember who I am? And that's where, for me, don't have to give gift cards, don't have to give Jordans, but who will enable you to use that platform to level yourself up that you can't do yourself? And it's a shortcut to do it that otherwise may take 6 to 9 months to 12 months to do on your own.
I love it. I didn't think about it from that angle, but that actually makes a ton of sense. Also, you're going to get some word of mouth from that, because to your point, they're going to remember where those Jordans came from. And if people ask, they're going to tell them. I like that a lot. I've seen one of my friends' companies was doing the Yeti thing with the Stanley mugs now, because I think that's the new Yeti. We've done one physical event where we had a booth this year. It was our very first event, and we were trying to figure out like what is a clever thing we can do. And we have our logo is kind of a cube. So, and one of my co-founders' kids is really into Rubik's Cube. So we're like, let's own the Rubik's Cube. We can do a 2x2 cube that has our logo on it. And to your point, everyone wanted to bring them back to their kids. So it was one of those things where people came up to get them solely because they're like, oh, my kid would love this, which is a really good trick.
It comes back to, actually, you make a good point right now. I'm realizing more and more as, you know, I've gotten older, I have a kid, and a lot of decision makers have kids, that it's almost, I hate saying this, but like, what motivates them to like do things that they wouldn't go out of their normal path to go do. And like I'm finding like appealing to what they would want for their kids seems to be working. And
It's true.
and it's not that I'm trying to be like manipulative. I'm like, well, how do I get your attention out of your normal path that you normally conduct life in? What can I do to like break you out of that pattern? Well, I got to find what motivates you. And how do we find things that motivate people that are not just another white paper or webinar, attending an event or happy hour or dinner, right? Just like trying to find that different angle that's like, oh, yeah, I got to get that for my kid. Like that's how I'm trying to think. And I think, like, as you said, like doing the Rubik's Cube, you thought that way, right? And that makes them be like, oh, this is different. Like you care about my motivation so I can come and engage with you. So I have some trust built because you're thinking differently.
The one thing I did at a previous startup that also worked super well, which is kind of adjacent to this, is we would host dinners we were selling to CIOs, so big companies, very senior people. We would host a dinner at a CIO's house in a specific city and let them invite their peers, but also bring spouses. And when you can go to a dinner and bring your spouse, it's definitely not a selling dinner, but everyone attended, everyone took meetings afterwards. That was also a really great way to really make it more family oriented and something that they don't normally do from a work perspective. So that also was a good tactic.
I'd love to know like what made them take the meeting afterwards. I totally get having the wife there. That's like an automatic, like you'll get like 95% attendance because you're like, bring your spouse to an amazing dinner. But how did you guys get them to be like, what did you make them feel was a value or yeah, like I would love to know that part.
It was just really nice. We had like a very nice evening. And because it was in someone's house, it was just this fun dinner where there was no selling involved. It was pure just relationship building, enjoy yourself. We brought in a private chef, we brought in a cleaning crew, things like that. And I think because it was just a very authentic experience, they were willing to take the meetings. But I would say 9 out of 10 people took a meeting afterwards.
So like reciprocity, they're like, wow, you took care of me. Least I could do is like pay it back and see what you're about.
I think also somehow it ties kind of to your point of tying your brand with another more aspirational brand. We were tying ourselves with the CIO who hosted, and which typically was a person who was very aspirational for a lot of folks. So I think they saw us as an extension of that person. And if that person endorsed us, then they should take the meeting, I think.
No, I know you're right. And I think this is what, since we've gone such land of metrics in the last 10 years and trying to measure everything, the fundamentals of marketing, I think, have been lost. And this is where like my rant on outbound and my rant on SDRs is like very much like, hey, the fundamentals of marketing, like the measurements happen after you do the fundamentals of marketing, after you do the work, right? And that's where like you guys at Tofu do a lot of this stuff where you like put out content utilizing AI, but you're using AI as a means to an end. And you're really putting out content that gives value to the end user. And that's still fundamental. Like you got to give value to the end user and you got to like, how do you get about like getting people to recognize who you are? Either you build a brand and it takes time or you find shortcuts like thought leaders, like influencers in the space or subject matter experts who are willing to work with you because they believe in what you're doing and because they see that you see the problem they're solving, or other brands like the Yeti or Jordan's to lift you. And these are like just, I think, fundamentals of marketing that we've overmeasured and forgot to do. And I feel like we're having a course correction now because ZERP no longer is an option, right?
And so much of it is just an actual psychological game. And I think you and I were chatting about this before, but it really should come back to what we were doing before and ZERP and before is focusing on what's right for the company to grow as opposed to what's right for the customer. And from day one, when they interact with our brand, all the way till when they're a long-term customer, how do we focus on them and make them the center as opposed to us the center? And what are we doing and how are we moving you through a funnel? And I feel like that's also something people are trying to relearn because I think we kind of lost that over the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, and we have, and I'm like, why did that happen? Like, what happened that caused, again, that to get lost? And now why outbound is just everyone saying, I can help you solve XYZ. Here's 1,000 emails and go bombard everyone's inbox because now Outreach and Sales Loft have enabled me to do this. Like what made this happen? Like, I can't put my finger on it, but when I was at Amplitude, I'd have the SDRs and AEs be like, hey, can I just run my own sequences? I'd be like, hell no. Like, you are not going to run your own sequences. It's not because I don't trust you as a human. We haven't trained you how to think where it's not just 10,000 emails going to a spam box and now we're burning domains, like you said. And I have consultants and vendors saying I can sell you warmed up domains. Like,
yes,
that's like, I broke my leg
every day.
Every day. Like, why would you do what? Why would you break your leg in the first place? Why are you doing that?
Well, and I think, the whole definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. It's like, cool, we burned that domain. Let's try another one and new group of people. Um, I have a theory on how it happened, sort of. Uh, I think a couple things all had to come together at one time, but we had a few things happen. The first is we started incentivizing people with the wrong things. We incentivized SDRs with meetings booked. Quality did not matter. It was you got paid with meetings booked.
Yep.
I had managed an SDR team before. It was shocking how you move the incentive and behavior shifts dramatically. So categorically, we set incentives incorrectly. Now, great. My goal is meeting booked. I have a lot of different ways to approach that. People don't like cold calling. It's awkward. You get angry people on the other end. It's a lot of work. Well, now with all the parallel dialers and things like that, it's less work. But it used to be a lot more work to actually get a single person to take a meeting.
Yep.
Other channels were either expensive and they had no budget, or somehow gated where you didn't have access. The only channel that was free, you had access, and that now these data brokers were coming with all the same data, it meant that email was the only channel. So you have one channel, you have a singular goal that you're comped on. It kind of naturally leads yourself to, let me see how many emails I can send to book my meetings.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, right? This is where we talked earlier too, is the number of channels hasn't expanded in the last 5 to 6 years. So but the surface area is still the same. So that means the density is higher and it costs way more to use other channels. And you nailed it. I never thought of that way. Email is a free channel. It costs nothing to do email. And that's why everyone leeches on and utilizes that. But then the other side, I started my career, I was a programmer, then I became an SDR because I was like, I'm better with people than I am coding. And so I would smile and dial. I would sit and smile and dial, but I could not tell you how much I learned qualitatively about the customer and what motivated them by doing that smiling and dialing and setting meetings that way. The email was a verification to the meeting. It was never how I got meetings. It was me just picking up the phone, and I'd do 80, 90 dials in a day, probably get 4 or 5 pickups and get 3, 4 meetings. As I got much better, my pickup to close rate went up drastically because I started understanding decision tree of this is what I need to say to get them here. And my goal isn't to get the meeting. My goal is to keep them on for 10 seconds, then the next 10 seconds, then get them to a minute. Okay, cool. I got them for a minute. I know they'll take a meeting. And so I started learning what would get them there. And that's where that work helped. Whereas an email, you send it, you get nothing back. You never know if it worked or didn't work, or unless you hit a hole in one, which is very rare to happen, right? Then you try all these sequences, and that's where, when you made that call, that's really true. Calling is awkward. People don't like it, but now we're seeing some calling come back. We're starting to implement calling with email, and we're seeing better rates of engagement happen. Not necessarily higher meetings set, but we're seeing engagements happen more than they were before.
I also think you bring up a really good point on the calling. You get that feedback on what language is the customer using? What are their pain points? I'm sending these emails into a void, not knowing if I'm hitting the nail or not. And by having those conversations with people, you start to learn over time those pain points, how our positioning is resonating or not. How do I adjust my language, all that kind of stuff. And I think that's something that's invaluable and kind of getting lost. I have a rule with emails. A lot of our customers, we built in our product the ability to have Tofu create templates for SDR emails, simply because we were having people bring their templates originally, and they were so bad. And my number one rule of email templates is read it out loud. Would you say that to a human in person on a call? If the answer is no, it's a horrible email. So, rewrite it, figure it out. And I think having that repetition on the calling means you'll translate that hopefully to your emails.
Are you guys going to put a feature where it'll read it out loud to you before you send it?
That's a great idea. That's actually,
I think it'd be amazing.
I love that.
I think
bring that back to our team.
Exactly. SDRs put it in, they're let me read this out. Oh, this doesn't sound good. Okay. Because again, any product like Tofu or other tools that generate things, it's 70% of the way there. You still got to do the work to get it 100% of the way there. Right. So if you read it out loud, you're oh, this didn't come out right. Let me tweak this right away. I think it'd be super cool. You're have your emails read out loud before you hit send.
I love that. I actually totally think we should do that and almost force people to do it, because I think also one thing I'm learning now, continuing to build product quickly, is we can only control so much. but we're still measured on outcomes that we can't control.
Yeah.
So the more I can actually control for a customer, the more opinionated we can be about things, the better everyone is. So I think that if we almost force stuff that we know is good practice, even if it's a friction point or a barrier, I feel like that's better overall for everyone.
Exactly. You actually nailed that. As we're like building organizations and scaling sales and marketing, like I would often see, and this goes back to outbound, go to market and doing what's right for the company versus the customer. People would do things that would remove friction internally, but would cause friction externally. And I was like, what? Why are you doing this? Like, well, it's easier for us to route the lead. I'm like, who gives a shit if it's easier for you to route the lead? If it's easier for them to book a meeting, do that. Like, if it takes me 2 clicks to book a meeting versus 4 because the extra 2 lets you route it to your rep or SDR in the back end, what the hell? No, like that's not putting the customer first. That's actually hurting us in the long term. And like, that's where, when you just said that, I think that's also another reason why outbound is, for me, gotten out of control. Is I'm doing what's right for the company and not what's right for the customer. Like I've lost sight of that completely. I'm like, hey, I got to hit my goals, but wait, why should the customer give a shit about you? Like, what have you done to make them care that you care about them?
How do you flip it back? Like, how are you on your team flipping it back to really focus on what's right for the customer at every touch point?
So, I mean, I've had to go in, right, and like kind of change the mindset. So what we do every week is I pick a customer call on Monday that's happened that the SDRs and A's have gone discovery. And I have the team listen to it. And on Friday, we actually review like, hey, what did we learn from this? And what are we going to take away and implement in the call? And it's a call that AE gave SDR, like booked the demo. And we're like, hey, this is where we thought they were off. We were confused why they were doing this. And this is what we learned. And I'd give that feedback I still do give that feedback to the head of sales and marketing teams. We look and say, okay, what do we need to change here? And what did we learn? And what do we think could be done differently from our end versus also giving feedback to the SDRs and AEs. That's one way. And we listen to the calls actually, and we pick different industries. So we're like, not just focused on one industry, but others. And it's effort. The team is like, well, why do we have to do this? And that was what's surprising is a lot of marketers, believe it or not, don't like talking to customers. They don't. I don't know why. And it's almost like they're scared that they're going to be invalidated or they're going to be told they're in the wrong. And it's lazy marketing, to be very honest with you. And like, I try to beat that out of them. I'm like, get on a call, go listen to this. Tell me who you've talked to. And they don't like it. And you have to just push and push. And that's the job of a leader, right? And as you know, as a co-founder and the CEO, you're like having to beat and be like, this is a standard. I need you to meet it, and constantly iterate that you need to meet the standard. And this is how you're not meeting it. And that is our job. And as everyone talks about founder mode, like founder mode, yeah, great. But realistically, that's what your job is. Like, you set standards and then you make sure people meet those standards, and the standards will change as what you need to do changes. But yeah, that's what I've done. Like, and it's not easy. Like, it's a muscle people don't like doing. And I'm not sure why, because I get a high off talking to customers or listening to them.
I do too. It's actually a really good point. And figuring out, how do you take people who are uncomfortable with that? And even if they don't get comfortable, just force them to, because it's the right thing to do. Curious though, why do you not have your sales leader sit in on those Friday calls?
So the sales leader has another call where he does this with his team. So
why don't you combine them?
So the reason why I didn't want to combine them, because I had people who were uncomfortable already as it is. So I didn't want to put everyone in the same room.
Oh.
And
like, show one of the sales team, even if you're picking apart. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that's why I was like, should I? And I was like, well, maybe not yet. Like, because I need to fine tune the folks in my room to like know what to pick on and not pick on, and understand what is like innately off limits, and not because it shouldn't be, but it's more like what makes sense to talk about versus not, and getting them there and creating a safe space for them to have those type of interactions before combining those two. So
that is totally fair. I find in general, anytime, especially any roles where there can and will be a little bit of friction, even if it feels like a good relationship, the more they don't hear it from you, but hear it from a customer or somebody external, the more it resonates. And so we do a similar practice where we watch customer calls, but more from an engineering perspective, to see where people falling down in the product, where is there friction, where is it unclear. And I could tell them all day long what I'm seeing on customer calls or what I'm seeing as a user, but them actually physically watching a recording, it goes so much further.
That's exactly it. That's why I was like, listen to the call. And I'm like, dude, with all these AI tools, you can listen to a 45-minute call in 20 minutes and have insights. Like,
yes.
And that's also like the key has been like getting them to think that way. And then that's as much as I could say, oh, it was easy, it's not. And I wish I knew psychologically why it's that way, because I don't think that way. So I'm like, I struggle with that a little bit. Like, guys, why aren't you listening to the calls? Like, oh, we had this. And I'm like, yeah, but guys, this is a priority. This matters. You need to like put effort, because our marketing will be 10x better. This is like getting the answers to the test. Like, you have the answers. Like, look at them. You're hitting your head against the wall.
I know, or guessing in a vacuum.
Yeah.
How do you think about engaging marketing with customer success? I know everyone always talks about marketing and sales, but I also think that that's another thing that tends to fall down a little bit, is marketing is not as engaged with the actual customer success team and getting that kind of feedback or getting insights from that team. What do you guys do at MoEngage?
So one of the things we've done is, like, we want case studies. Everyone wants case studies, right? And it's like, oh, let's go to customer success for that. So instead of doing that, like, I saw case studies take a lot longer to get through legal, through XYZ. So I was like, hey, customer success, let's work on getting people onto webinars, and let's get them onto webinars with other people at brands like the Marketunist, and get them to talk about how they solved the problem. Obviously, MoEngage will come up. And so what I did was, and continue doing, is getting them to be the hero. Go to customer success and be like, hey, customer success, we're hosting an AMA, like we're doing like the Tofu Bowl. We had customer engagement AMA. Who are the customers that we can spotlight here? It's for their brand. It's for people to come to them and talk to them about how they're doing, what they're doing. MoEngage is just a vessel. They don't even have to talk about MoEngage. This is about them and their career. And so what we try to do with customer success is like, how can we take these customers and make them heroes and make them Luke and we're just Yoda? And the reason is, it's easier to get through legal. It's easier to get stories out of them, and they feel good about it because they're chest beating and feeling like they're a visionary and a thought leader, and that builds their brand. And so that's what we do more with CS. And there's some projects coming out you'll see from us. I don't want to talk too quickly here, but that position our customers as the hero, and non-customers as the hero, and really allow them to build their brand. Because ultimately, for me, marketing is all about, I'm realizing more and more, like, as there's less surface area, less channels, if I can make you feel good about yourself and make you feel like the hero, you're going to want to engage with me. And obviously, to do that, I have to be genuine. I have to understand your problem, and I have to know what you're trying to solve and your motivations. But ultimately, if that is what I care, and I want my teams to make sure to do for you, and I do for you, you're going to trust me and want to work with me. And that's how I use CS and work with CS, because they look good too. They're not always like, oh, we go to them for bugs. They're like, no, hey, here's an opportunity to make you look good. We're going to get you attendees and build your brand.
I love that. I think the theme of this that I'm learning from you, which I really need to also take in practice, is leverage other leverage other brands to help build your own. It's whether it's your customers, whether it's influencers, whether it's a brand like Jordan's, anything like that. It's, you don't put yourself first, you become the vessel, I like that word. But I think that's a really great strategy overall. I think more people should do that.
Yeah. I mean, it took some learning. It wasn't like you dawn on this stuff, right? But like, just reading books, like, you learn like what makes people engaged and do stuff is like when they feel like you care about them, which you should. Like, genuinely, you can care about people and their problems, and you can learn how to do that, because that just makes life go so far, right? I mean, like, we had conversations off LinkedIn, and it's led to this, right? And I just realized, like, when you pay it forward and you put the other person first, like, awesome things happen, not just in the business world, but in the personal world, and just like for your own like mental sanity and gratitudeness too. I might be venturing off into another realm here, but like, I just found, like, for my sanity, it works really well.
That's always, anytime I'm talking to younger people who are early in their careers, I always tell them I got everywhere I did by giving away my time for free and just trying to add value where I could and trying to learn from people who were offered to teach me things. And I think that's just showing up and doing it, and, you know, being a part of the conversation, even with no expectation of anything in return, is the best thing you can possibly do for yourself.
Yeah. And I think you put it so great. And obviously, you're a VC in your previous life before this, right? And you had to practice that quite a bit to get into deals, to get access to things that you may have not with founders, right? And that's where you know this so well. And I think, like, obviously, as you implement it and you say to younger people, it's going to come back and work 10x better. But yeah, it's maybe we're ending on a very different note than we started, but that's
very positive. I like it. Well, this has been super fun, Aditya. Let's do part 2 in the new year. Hopefully, you'll get some sleep over the next few weeks.
hopefully, and then in the new year, hopefully part 2, I can talk about the other stuff we're doing where we really leveraged other people and put them first in the brand. There's a big project we're working on, so hopefully I can share more about that once that's live. So
That would be awesome. Let's do it.
cool.
We'll talk
Thank
to you
you.
then.
Have a good one.
Thanks for coming.